I want to ask you a question. Just how many times have you found yourself in a relationship that ended up looking much different than the way it started out? If you're anything like me, it's been more often than you would like to acknowledge. Hindsight is 20/20 vision, right? It is. But get the revelation. Hindsight in this season turns into foresight for the rest of your life. Revelation brings power. So let's explore relationships. There are many lessons to be learned from the book of Ruth. In it, we find one of the most amazing opportunities to see people who exemplify the often heard terms regarding relationships. That's reason, season, lifetime. So let's start with the lifetime relationship. It's the relationship that Ruth has sold out to. Ruth is to be commended for committing to stay with Naomi when things got tough. And although Naomi was insistent upon Ruth leaving, and although Ruth herself was going through, there was something in Ruth that told her she could not leave this woman. I'm not sure about you, but I've experienced rejection before. It is a hurtful feeling, and it's intensified when you're already in pain. But when you know that you know that you know that God has ordained for you to walk with someone, you're able to somehow access the grace of God and withstand that test. You're able to remember your purpose in the relationship, and then you dig in. You dig in until that person comes out on the other side. In Ruth's loyalty, she was rewarded. God used Naomi to connect Ruth to her new husband and to usher her into a relationship that was divinely purposed. Ruth is going to always be studied and commended for the character that she possessed during those difficult times. So now let's switch gears and look at seasonal relationships. Orpah's the young lady who represents the season. And unfortunately, so many times Orpah is slighted for having left Naomi. She's compared to Ruth, who stayed, and she's somehow seen as the antithesis of Ruth. She's seen as that disloyal, unfaithful, uncommitted one, as someone who leaves when the going gets tough. But really, that's an unfair assessment. Seasons change, circumstances change, people evolve, and life springs unexpected twists and turns on us. And to be honest, sometimes the season for a relationship ends, or it changes very drastically. And in this case, Orpah's season with Naomi was over. As we reflect on the story, it seems that Orpah cried just as badly as Ruth did every time Naomi told them to leave. And I don't know about you, but I sure have had some relationships that I've had to walk away from that tore me to pieces. I cried, but in spite of the tears, God still said it was time to go. And then there have been relationships when others walked away from me, and it did not feel good at the time. But I later found out that that was the best thing that could have happened for either of us. Now, look back on your own life and just imagine how different life might have been if that relationship had remained intact. Some relationships could have truly soured and gone even further south. You wouldn't have made room for other people to enter your life, and you certainly would not have experienced growth in particular areas of your life. I'm certain that the bond that was forged between Naomi and Ruth would not have been the same had Orpah not heard that it was time to exit stage right. Sometimes we look at a person like Orpah, for example, and we base our opinion of them on one act in their lives. And as women, we'll often say, well, if it had been me. But that's very unfair to say, because you will never be that woman with her set of circumstances, her background, or her future. You are and will only ever be you. And you can't honestly say what you would do in any given situation until you're in it with the same exact set of circumstances. And that will be never. So, whereas at one time I felt that Orpah left when the going got tough, that she said in her head, honey, you don't have to tell me again. I now commend her for leaving, because that in and of itself can be difficult. To go back to what you left behind and try to pick up the pieces when you're in another phase and another stage of your life, that's not always easy. So with that new insight, my hat goes off to Orpah. Lastly, let's look at Naomi, and I hope that you'll hear me when it comes to this particular person. Naomi obviously loved her husband and her sons, and she found herself in a painful place. She had to make decisions that no one ever wants to make, and she had to do something that she probably never imagined she'd have to do. She had to return to her home without her blood family. She was fortunate to have 2 daughters-in-law who obviously loved her, but their love wasn't strong enough to penetrate the pain. And we see that Naomi has entered into a state of grief, a state of depression, but also a state of bitterness. She's bitter with God because she feels that He has dealt harshly with her. She's entered a space where many people find themselves when they've experienced loss or trauma. If people aren't careful, they will push others away because they would rather reject them than lose them or be disappointed by one more person that they love. Sometimes after a death or a loss of some kind, whether it's the loss of a spouse or a loss due to divorce or the loss of a friendship or they've endured some trauma, sometimes people back away from everything and everyone that they hold dear. They become weary of losing, and so it becomes easier to reject, easier to commit relationship sabotage. But one thing we have to remember is that after every loss, especially death, is that if God were finished with us, He would have taken us. But because there's still breath in our bodies, we have to commit to purpose. We cannot afford to forget the reason that we're here. That's not to say that someone isn't allowed to grieve or that sometimes people don't need a moment to gather themselves. But when people begin to run off everyone around them and reject the love, that's a problem. I'm so grateful that Ruth persisted. So I urge you, think back on your life and see if there's a time when you experienced a transition and the pain of that thing caused you to forget the reason God had you in the earth, the reason He'd placed someone in your life, the reason you're on that job, the reason He placed you in that church, the reason you're in that family. When did it get so rough that you said, to heck with it all? When did it get so rough that you sabotaged a relationship because you were afraid of how things might turn out? When did you throw in the towel? Or who was it that you left hanging? Who was left without your attention, your guidance, your love, your friendship? Well, Naomi's life began to change when she grabbed hold of purpose again. When she understood that the reason she was left here was to continue to do purpose, that's when her life changed. The more she poured out, the more she received. Some of us are so stagnant and feel so dead because nothing's going out. We're holding on to everything, afraid to lose again. We live life in the inhale position. But I encourage you today, stop waiting to exhale. Just breathe. Just breathe, woman of God. Just breathe, man of God. Just breathe. And when you let go, when you pour it out, when you breathe again, something's gonna happen. And watch, you'll find that as you breathe life into another, a flow's gonna begin. An exchange is gonna take place. And as you give life, you're going to receive life. As Naomi began to give the wisdom of a mother to Ruth, when she treated her as a daughter, which is what she called her in chapter 1, she in turn received favor. When Boaz blessed Ruth, he blessed Naomi as well. So I encourage you today, find yourself in these scriptures. Find your neighbors, your co-workers, your family members, the person you're not so sure of. Find them inside these 3 ladies. Praise God for the Ruths. They're the ones who keep going in spite of. They love in spite of. They live in spite of. They're loyal to the end. But also praise God for the Orpas, because sometimes it takes more courage to leave someone than it does to stay with them. They're the ones who must take a chance and go back to people or places they never thought they'd return to. And then there are the Naomis. They're the ones who are most afraid. And the fear comes out as anger. The fear comes out as rejection. The fear comes out as bitterness. Don't be Naomi, not in that bitter state. But don't shun Naomi either. Pray for Naomi, because there's so much in her. There's so much more that she has to give. Pray that Naomi has someone in her life who can outlast her pain, someone whose love can withstand the test, someone who's seen her better days and knows that when she speaks, wisdom speaks, someone who knows just how much life and love Naomi still has to give. Pray that Naomi will exhale. And in exhaling, will breathe life into another. Relationships matter, and you have a role in every one of them you're in. Know your purpose in your relationships. Be able to sense when a relationship is seasonal, but give it the attention you're supposed to in that season because you sense that your time is limited. And then rest assured that if you've been divinely connected to someone for life, God has given you the grace to ride the waves with them. Stay connected to Him so you can stay connected to them. Reason, season, lifetime. Know your role and play it well.